think there's the other one I thought of. I don't know if it's very good though. Is um, and it just came to me off the top of my head when I was talking to you yesterday. It was like, do you need to feel a muscle working for it to be working?
Do you right? Yes. Well, that kind of ties in, to be honest.
Just because, you know, people are like, oh, I can't like I'm squatting and I can't feel my glutes. It's like, don't
Right.
worry, your glutes are fucking working, you know?
Yeah, that's actually a good point because people have become obsessed these days. Well, I'll tell you what, should I read what I've
Yeah,
wrote?
yeah, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
And then it is definitely going to spark some questioning after I've read this.
Yeah.
And I ain't going to go on for too long. Don't worry. I'm not going to like read for fucking years. I'm going to second because sometimes it's a nice way to open everything out, isn't it? You
Mm.
know? Okay. I'm not built to squat. This is often the excuse I'll hear from someone who doesn't want to do the work required to get better, or they're simply misinformed. Squats, presses, deadlifts are normal human movement patterns. Our bodies have evolved over thousands of years with the ability to function so we can push something over our head, bend over, pick something from the ground. Arguing you are unable to do these movements because you listened to some biomechanics expert online who's encouraging you to sit into a machine, ironically, is a backwards way of thinking and denies your normal movement capacity. The only difference, however, is that we load the entire system with a barbell and incrementally progress it over time. Sure, leverages will vary from person to person. Someone might have longer femurs and a shorter torso, making their squat look different from someone who has the opposite anthropometrics, but the principles of how to execute quality technique remain the same. The squat might look different, but the point remains you can still squat. Online gurus will tell you differently. Use a machine that better suits, in quotes, your mechanics. Someone apparently these days, somehow apparently these days, your quads just opt out and because you have longer legs. People have become fixated on muscles and have forgotten about movement, and that's a big issue. So that's exactly what you're talking about there, isn't it?
Yeah, literally nail on the head. Yeah.
Um, the problem comes in where most coaches don't actually know how to teach the movements correctly. When they tell you to jump on a machine, what they are actually admitting is that they don't know how to teach the movement adequately to you. Putting you on a leg extension requires no real coaching skill. You just sit there, extend your knee some, then flex it back down again, whilst the sloppy trainer counts your reps and the clock on the wall. What isn't normal, contorting your body into a machine and stressing individual muscle groups and isolating joints, that negates the true function of the muscle and therefore ceases to be strength training. You see machines give the illusion of precision, but all they do is produce abnormal human movement. Whereas free weight training encourages it. Coaches are more than happy to outsource responsibility to them, however, because it makes their life easier. So, now that's a pretty. Now you can see why this book is pretty fiery, mate. It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
fiery.
I know, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Ruffle some feathers. Yeah.
it's going to ruffle some feathers to say the least. But we both know, right, that there's, and I go into the psychology a little bit more behind why I think people prefer machines today as well.
Mm, mm,
Um, and I can read that maybe to close, right? Because I think that might be a nice way to close out the podcast. But
mm.
um, what's your thoughts on this whole idea then of like, kind of people that will talk about, do you know what? Like, I'm not suited to squat. Um, I'm not suited to do what a dip or something like that, because you're into free weight movements as much as me, right? Um,
Mm.
and partly because I can't feel that muscle working, you know?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
So I think some people maybe don't have. I agree. Some people can't get into and an ass to grass barbell squat or
Right.
like whether they're squatting low bar like you do. Some people I think maybe straight off the bat can't get into it, and likewise some people can't get into a dip. They don't have the range through their shoulders, whatever. So some people need more access before they can necessarily get in and start loading that. But that doesn't mean that they can never ever do it. It just might take some time to get there.
Right, right. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I don't think there is there's any such thing as, I don't have the body to allow me to do that, or I'm not suited for this exercise. Like maybe someone might, I don't know, they may need to elevate their heels to begin with when they're squatting, or they may need to go with a front racked goblet squat, whatever it be to begin with. But I think saying that, oh, I can never barbell back squat is doing yourself a disservice.
And it's also really disheartening. Imagine you've hired a
Yeah.
coach, right? And the coach looks at you and goes, "Do you know what? I think your femurs are too long, and I don't think you're ever going to be able to squat properly. So let's stick you on a pendulum squat instead," which
Yeah.
happens a lot.
Oh, I know. It's easy, isn't it? Put someone on there and beast them through it.
Yeah, it requires no coaching skill, really, does it? If we're being
Mm,
honest, it doesn't. You fix yourself into a machine, you come down and you come back up, and that's it. That's all that happens.
mm,
Now, the truth of the situation is that very few coaches know how to teach basic barbell movements properly.
yeah.
And I can tell you that after doing this for 10 years now,
Yeah.
and being in gyms and looking at how coaches operate on the gym floor and some of the techniques that are put forward, there isn't a real in-depth understanding of how to, from the coach's perspective, but then how to apply
Mm,
that to their clients. So people will just go, "Do you know what? Let's stick you on a machine instead." And this whole thing of feeling your muscles, this is a concept that has been derived largely from universities, I think, and training studies about this whole
mm,
idea of mind-muscle connection, you know. Now, look, your feelings and how your muscles feel are irrelevant largely because if you're flexing and extending joints, those muscles will be working. They have to work to be able to use that joint correctly. So the feeling of the muscle is largely irrelevant. What you need to be focusing on is the quality of the movement. So looking at like, okay, how is my body moving through space? You know, um,
mm.
are my hips in the right spot? Where are my knees relative to my toes? Those are the things that you should really be concerned about. When you're looking at,
Yeah.
uh, you know, uh, uh, like, yeah, am I making a muscle grow? Am I trying to get stronger? Those are the
Mm,
things for both of those things, which people mainly want, you need to be focusing on is the movement quality, not the mind-muscle connection. Um, but yeah, I mean, this whole idea of you are right in what you said, though. There's varying levels of that. You've got some people that like can sit down as to grass, and
yeah.
they're fine with that. And other people that they try and do that, and then they dump a lot of stability and hip tightness and tension. They can't do that, but it doesn't mean that you can't squat. You can still
No,
squat.
yeah, that's it. There's always a variation that suits you. And I think it can work two ways. I think you've got some people be like, oh yeah, you're not built for this. You can't do this. But then you also get someone who will be like, they want to force the client into a movement
That they
by
can't.
any means necessary. And some
Yes,
people, yeah, they don't have the mobility. They don't have the strength for it yet. And forcing them into that position is going to cause a problem.
that's a
So
great
that,
point.
it's the key thing, what we do with ATG. It's like people often see ATG and they go, "Oh, you just force people into that end range split squat with that, that deep knee flexion." It's like no, complete misunderstanding of how the system works and like the gradual progressions and regressions in order to eventually get someone there.
Right. And that's a good point that you've added in there because, you know, I do think everybody can squat because we've evolved to
Mm,
squat. But because of years of wear and tear, because of body misuse, and because of just neglecting your health potentially for years
yeah.
and years, people have lost that. Some people will lose that ability to get into a proper squat. Right. And so what we teach then, or what I teach, is proper movement regression. So if someone can't get into a full depth squat yet, then we find alternative means to do that. And there's
Mm.
nothing wrong with that, right? Like, people listening, don't beat yourself up over it. Like, it is what it is. At least you're trying to do something about it, and to reverse that, and trying to do something there, and that's where, you might go onto something like a machine, like a leg press, for instance, that is providing you with that stability that you're lacking, and you're building up the weight there over time. You're getting stronger with it, and in the background practicing your body weight squats, and then getting off the leg press. That's kind of the whole point, right? Like, you want to stay on
Mm.
it forever, but you want to ideally get off there and use it as a stepping stone. And I think that, yeah, that is absolutely, a valid way of looking at that. But these people, they just think, oh yeah, I'm just going to avoid barbell back squatting. It's like, actually, that could be a little bit of a problem, if you want to get stronger.
Yeah, avoidance is literally never the solution. It's just regressing to find your entry point and then
Right.
building it from there.
Well, I do think as
In
well.
my opinion, that's how I coach someone.
Yeah, I do think training studies have a big part to play in all of this as well. I sent you the other day, you probably haven't read it, you haven't had time, but I wrote again a piece on my opinion on training studies, and kind of
Mm.
how that has misled a lot of people, I think, in
Yeah.
recent times. I almost think that our North Star has become a training study that has lasted 12 weeks, instead of, a coach's experience over a decade, and working with
Mm-hmm.
thousands of clients. And if you take a look at these training studies, a lot of them affirm the belief system of a lot of these coaches that do push more machines. And they'll say,
Yeah.
well, there's equivalent hypertrophy, or there's more hypertrophy, or there's more EMG activation. The problem is, the studies are deeply flawed to begin with the individuals that they use in the study, and the variables outside of the gym are loosely controlled too, which makes the whole thing fall on his face, in terms of recovery metrics and stuff like that. Um, but the fundamental point is that they're also measuring the wrong things too, right? Like, a lot
Mm.
of these studies are set up, EMG activation of a muscle. No, I don't care about that. I care about how much force is that muscle producing today, and how much force is that muscle producing, a year from now. That's what it comes down to,
Yeah.
you know? And so the parameters are all off. So it creates this situation that we're in today, where you'll scroll on social media and, everybody's doing machines today. And in my opinion, if you want to be capable, independent, talk about athleticism and you don't have to, I don't mean like being a top level athlete by any means,
No,
but
being able to move though.
being able to move,
That's
within
the
the
thing. Yeah.
domains of your own life. I'm sorry, a pulley system isn't really going to cut it, is it?
I know. Yeah. Someone can, yeah, they can max out whatever, the leg extensions and all of that. And I don't think you're really setting yourself up to be able to, move and express force in the way that you'll need to if you want to go into sports and do everyday activities
Yeah, and
as you
that's
would with other, with like you said, with barbell movements, using free weights, everything else.
right. And it's because those movements aren't set up to train the true function of the
Mm.
muscle, right? Which
Yeah.
they're designed to isolate. Now, if you want to be a bodybuilder and
Yeah.
do
That's
that,
it. Prime. Yeah. Perfect. But yeah,
that's
for the
fine.
everyday person, they probably don't want that, do they?
They don't want that.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, the bodybuilding stuff doesn't work anyway.
Mm.
I don't think isolating muscles, and look, I'm not saying this to be like, you know, like come across as edgy, right? Like, I'm saying it because it's
Yeah.
it's my experience, and
Mm.
like doing this last 10 years and doing this stuff. You saw me training and how I used to train. I'd do all sorts of stuff. I'd just do the, leg extensions and hamstring curls and all sorts of machines. And none
Mm.
of it made me any bigger, and none of it made me any more athletic at all, you
Yeah.
know? So when I'm talking this way and I talk so plainly about it, it's coming from a place of like experience, you know? I don't do any machines today. None. No machines
Mm.
at
No,
all.
I find them personally. I find them boring as hell. Like, I've never, you know me, I've never been interested in just just bodybuilding, just getting jacked. I literally couldn't care less. I care about, yeah, how well I can perform and how well I can move. So for me, locking myself into a machine, boring as hell. No interest in it.
And
You
there's
know,
no,
and to each their own, isn't it?
yeah, to each to their own.
Some
Yeah,
people would absolutely
absolutely.
hate, someone would absolutely hate the idea of performing muscle ups on gymnastic rings. They're like, that's going to bore me to death. I'd rather rep out on cable flies,
Right,
you know,
right, right,
follow
right.
your own goal and everything. But yeah, I just think very in the fitness industry is quick to be like push people into that, yeah, machine based training. Assume everyone just has a maximum hypertrophy goal.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. But the
And even like you
pendulums,
said there, that
what's
it's
that?
not even the best. It's not even the best method for achieving that, is it? As you said.
You're trying to set me up
I'm
now,
just saying,
innit?
like you said, you know,
Another
there's
rant.
a obviously tension is the biggest driver, and obviously you're going to be limited with a cable stack of how much load you can, you know, you can put on yourself, isn't it?
Right. Well, there's two types of tension. There's two grades of tension, right? So
Mm.
people talk about mechanical tension as if it's all the same thing, and it's not. So you've got mechanical tension that comes from people that think somehow you can get bigger by going to failure, right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is you can go to failure with light weights,
Mm.
and failure is tied to time under tension, right? That's what
Mm.
failure is tied to. That's the whole idea of it. The problem is when you go to failure, the fibers that are exposed, the big force producing fibers that finally they kind of get tapped into as the reps go on, the forces are so light from the light weights that the person is using that they don't respond. So
Yeah.
that so that's type A. Okay. Now you've got mechanical tension type B, which I think is the gold standard, is tension that is derived from progressively heavier weights.
Mm.
And when you go up in weight, what are you asking that muscle mass to do? To produce more force. And a muscle has to get bigger by when you ask it to increase its force production. It
Yeah.
has to get bigger. And so that is what I believe is the only way you make a muscle bigger. In my experience too. Like lifting progressively heavy weights over my entire time training is what has made me bigger. I can never say that a set of 20 excruciating leg extensions ever made me any bigger at all. It might
Mm.
have been painful in the moment. It might have made my quads a little bit more pumped, but it actually didn't change the, the thickness of my legs at all. But again,
Yeah.
it's the difference between pumping up a balloon and laying down a brick in the house. That's what it is.
Mm.
It's a
Mm.
big, big difference. You
Well,
might
you've
be
got
doing
that, isn't
something.
it? They talk about myofibril hypertrophy versus sarcoplasmic. You know,
Yeah.
apparently you're increasing fluid storage within the muscle, aren't you?
That's the
That's,
idea, right? And then
yeah.
getting a bunch of beneficial muscle building properties in there. But that's never been
I
my
see. I
experience.
see the benefit of that if you're coming back from injury, because obviously you're
100%.
driving a ton of like fluid
Fluid.
and nutrients into the tissue. But for someone who's uninjured and they're training, yeah, whatever they're to get stronger or build muscle if their body composition goal out, yeah, I don't really see the benefit in that
No,
myself.
I don't at all either, mate. But anyway, you got to pop off soon. Anyway, do you want to see us out, big boy?
Yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, please subscribe and leave us a rating and review, and we'll catch you in the next one.